You know, I always considered myself a peace-loving person. 15 years of legal practice have taught me a thing or two: most conflicts indeed can be resolved amicably. But then, at times, life springs such surprises that even the coolest of heads may lose patience. It all started last Tuesday. I sat on the veranda of my house, watching my 5-year-old daughter Sophia play on the lawn. Her sonorous laughter filled the yard, but I could see sadness in her eyes. She was the only child in our elite neighborhood, and she often missed the company of her peers. "Mom, why does Jessica from the neighborhood have a swing and not me?" she asked, leaning against me. That was a heartbreaker. Immediately that evening, I began going through the playground catalog in search of something special for my little princess. And then, I found the perfect option: a small but beautiful play complex with a swing, a slide, and a small house that would fit perfectly into a corner of our spacious yard without compromising the overall aesthetics of the area. The order was placed, and I could already imagine Sophia's joyful face. But then everything changed the next morning. Sharp at 7:30, when I was getting ready for breakfast for Sophia, suddenly the doorbell rang loudly. On the threshold, however, was Richard Stone, the big shot of our housing association, a 50-year-old face with the color of an overripe tomato. "Miss Anderson," he thundered without even saying hello, "I have received information about your plans to establish some." He waved a folder with documents, as if it were weapons of mass destruction. I took the papers coolly from his hands, although all was seething inside. After years in court, I knew how to keep my emotions in check, but this man made the limits of my patience taut. According to HOA rules, Section 4, Paragraph 9, he poked his finger at the text: any exterior designs must be approved by the committee. And I, as the chairman of the committee, am categorically against turning our prestigious district into a playground. I slowly folded the papers and looked him in the eyes. "Mr. Stone, I will carefully study the documents and provide an answer within the stipulated time. You have 3 days," he snapped. "Otherwise, we will file a formal complaint." When the door closed behind him, I allowed myself to smile. Poor Richard did not even suspect that he was threatening the senior partner of the law firm Anderson & Partners, which specializes in property disputes. I took out my laptop and opened a folder with local laws. If Mr. Stone wants war, he will get it. And Sophia. That will be on her own website, which I shall take care of. Plunged, for 2 days and 2 nights, into the documents, every paragraph of the HOA bylaws, every local ordinance, no matter how apparently trivial, something was important. 15 years at the bench have taught me one thing: the devil is in the details. And I did find such details. "Mom, why do you sit with the computer and work so much?" Then Sophia climbed onto my lap. Her huge blue eyes stared so seriously that her heart fell. "Well, you know, sometimes grown-ups need to read a great deal for the dreams of their childhoods to come true," I said, taking her into my arms. That evening, I saw Richard Stone walking around my house with a man actively gesticulating and pointing to my yard. He took photos and took notes. Classic intimidation tactics, but they didn't realize who they had contacted. On the 3rd day, at exactly 9 in the morning, the doorbell rang. And this time, not just Richard was standing on my doorstep, but 2 other HOA committee members were also smiling in his company. Complacency was oozing from their faces. "Miss Anderson, time is up," Richard said, handing me a stack of new papers. "This is an official warning. If you don't give up your plans, Before you go any further, Mr. Stone," I cut in, pulling out my folder full of documents as well, "let me show you something interesting." I laid out a few photos in front of them, showing unmistakably Richard's own pool, installed 3 years prior. Under the same HOA bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 12, any water features must be approved not only by the committee but also by the City Council. "Do you have permission from the City Council, Mr. Stone?" His face colored first red, then white. The committee members exchanged glances. "But that's a completely different matter." He attempted to protest. "Really? What about Mrs. Johnson's satellite dish? Or Mr. Peterson's gazebos?" I have a complete list of charter violations over the past 5 years. Curiously enough, for some reason, the committee overlooked them. The air felt uneasy. I fished out my business card and handed it to Richard. By the way, let me introduce myself properly. Sarah Anderson, Senior Partner, Anderson Partners. I specialize in property disputes and protection of property rights. I propose to discuss this issue more constructively. Richard's face went ashen. Evidently, he did not expect such a turn of events. But that was just the beginning. There were still a few trump cards left in my arsenal, and I was going to play them at the best moment. I did not expect that Richard Stone would be a persistent man. Instead, he went all in. And in one day, an official letter from Barker Partners law firm, one of the biggest in my city, reached me. "Mom, why doesn't Uncle Richard say hello to us anymore?" asked Sophia when we came back from kindergarten. I couldn't help but notice how the neighbor, every time he saw us, would defiantly turn away. "Sometimes adults act just like children, Sunshine," I said, clutching her little palm even tighter. That evening, I sat in my home office, studying a letter from Richard's lawyers. They threatened a class action lawsuit on behalf of all residents of the district. The accusations were ridiculous, reducing the value of real estate, violating the aesthetic appearance of the area, creating dangerous conditions for residents. But the most interesting thing was in the annex to the letter, a petition allegedly signed by 25 residents of the district against the installation of a playground. I lifted the phone and dialed my old friend's number in the forensic laboratory. "Sandro, I need your help. How quickly can you verify the authenticity of the signatures?" In 2 days, the results of the check were on my desk. 8 signatures turned out to be fake, and 5 more belonged to people who had not lived in our area for a long time. I decided to act proactively. The next morning, I went around all the neighbors, showing them the results of the examination and telling them about the real situation. It turned out that most of them did not even know about this conflict, and some even supported the idea of a platform. "You know, my grandchildren will have a place to play when they arrive," said Mrs. Thompson, our oldest resident. But the biggest surprise was yet to happen that evening. Richard's wife, Carol, came over to my house. Her eyes were red from tearing up. "Mrs. Anderson. Sarah. I need your help," she said in a shaky voice. "Richard. He not only forged signatures. He has been using HOA funds for his own needs for years. I have proof." I invited her to the house. Sophia was coloring her future playground, adding more and more bright details. Carol took out a flash drive with documents. "I cannot keep silent anymore. He has always been in control, but lately, it has gone beyond all limits." While reading the documents, I noticed that the matter was much more serious than it initially appeared, and now I had to decide either to use this information or look for another way. The papers Carol provided disclosed the whole scheme of financial fraud. The tens of thousands of dollars that came in through resident contributions did not go to fix up the area, but to Richard's personal accounts. Now I knew why he was so desperate to cling on to his post of chairman in the HOA. "What is it, Mom?" Sophia had asked, as on night she saw me sitting over the papers. "You look sad." "Sometimes, Sunshine, adults need to make tough choices." I pulled her close to me. The next morning I had a call from John Barker, Richard's lawyer, saying he needed an emergency meeting with me. We agreed he'd meet in my office at 2 o'clock. Richard entered the office as if he had already won the battle. His self-sure smile told it all. His lawyer followed him, holding a thick folder with documents. "Miss Anderson," Barker began, "we are ready to discuss the terms of your surrender. We have all the necessary documents to prove that the installation of the playground violates at least 7 points of the HOA bylaws." I silently pulled out a flash drive and hooked it up to the computer. Financial reports and bank statements flashed on the big screen. "Gentlemen, before we go further, I'd like to talk about something even more interesting," I said in a calm tone. "For example, where did the $28,000, designated for the renovation of the common area last year, disappear to?" Richard's face went white as chalk. His lawyer stared at the screen very intently. Or maybe let's talk about fake bills from non-existent contractors? Or about fake signatures on petitions? It's slander! Richard burst out, leaping to his feet. I'm going to sue you! Sit down, Mr. Stone, I said icily. But I have a counter-offer. I pulled out a document pre-prepared. Your voluntary resignation from the position of chairman of the HOA. Instead, I want to add charges of fraud and forgery of documents to the case. Barker quickly looked through the papers and whispered something in his client's ear. Richard sat with his fists clenched, his face burning with rage and humiliation. You have 5 minutes to think, I added, looking at my watch. After that, I will call the prosecutor. But I didn't even know that Richard had prepared his last, most insidious move. Okay, he strained through his teeth, taking the pen. But instead of signing the papers, he took out his phone. Look out the window, Miss Anderson. There was a building crew in my yard. Workers have already begun to unload heavy equipment. While we're talking here, they're ready to start earthworks for the district's new sewer system. Richard smiled mischievously. And by a strange coincidence, the route goes right through the place where you planned your playground. My heart skipped a beat. He deliberately planned everything so that the installation of the site would be technically impossible. This is a municipal project approved by the city council last month, he added smugly. Even your legal talents are powerless here. Barker looked surprised. It would appear this move came as a surprise even to him. Slowly, I went to the window. The laborers had already begun marking the territory. Then I saw something odd, an old road sign, half concealed by shrubs. A sign nobody remembered, but which made all the difference. The highway, Mr. Stone? I asked, opening a map of city communications on my computer. Because, according to this document, back in 1989, because of the groundwaters, a protection zone was established here, and earthworks in this place are forbidden. I pulled my phone. I believe representatives of Ecological Inspectorate would be a lot more interested in finding out about that project. By the way, they should be here momentarily. Richard began to pale. His last trump card finally proved a broken card. You know, Mr. Stone, I said, holding out my pen to him, sometimes the best lesson is not to win, but to understand one's own mistakes. Sign the resignation and well, forget it all. 20 minutes later, everything was complete. Richard, staggering, walked out of my office, and his lawyer went with him. In 1 week, in our district, a new chairman of the HOA was elected. There was a bright playground appearing in the yard of my house, and next to it there were benches for parents. Now, every day there is children's laughter, not only Sophia's, but also other children from the area. And Richard? He put up his house for sale. They say he and Carol are moving to another state. Sometimes, the best way to start anew is to leave the old behind. Now, as I look at my daughter's happy face, I understand that some battles are worth embracing. Most especially those about childhood dreams. 6 months have passed. Our district is hardly recognizable, but for the better. The story with Richard seemed to wake them from such a long sleep. It turned out that behind the mask of an elite district, real life was hidden. Nowadays, every Sunday, Mrs. Thompson holds a tea party for children and their parents in her garden. Her cookies have turned legendary among the little ones. You know, I have already forgotten what it is like to hear children's laughter, she once told me when watching her grandchildren play with Sophia on the playground. The talent of Carol for landscape design turned out to be quite unexpected. After the divorce from Richard, she started a new life by opening her own company. Now our common areas look like pages of some gardening magazine. And the biggest surprise came a month ago. In the monthly HOA meeting, the young Parker family proposed creating a little community garden. Kids need to know how veggies and fruits grow, Emily Parker said. The proposition received unanimous support. One evening, Sophia and I sat on our new swing. And then out of the blue she asked, Mama, where did Uncle Richard go? I looked across at the house opposite, which housed a young couple with twins. He went to find a new place, sunshine. Sometimes people need to start over. Has he found his happiness? She asked with childlike spontaneity. I cuddled her tighter. You know, sometimes happiness isn't about having control over everything around you. It's about just letting others be happy. How did you let me have a playground? Exactly, sunshine. Exactly. Lying on our veranda that evening, staring at the stars, my mind was racing with how one little dream can totally change an entire community. Sometimes, one just needs to have the guts to stand up for what one thinks is right. And the folder containing the documents of Richard's case? It is still in my safe. Not as a weapon or proof, but as a reminder that justice doesn't win when someone loses, but when everyone gets a little better.